We've now had two Simpsons games in a row that weren't developed by Imagineering. Imagineering were the main developer of Simpsons games for Acclaim in the early 90s, so it was only a matter of time before we would see them again. We all know about Imagineering at this point, right? Late 80s, early 90s video game developer that rushed out way too many games, with most of them being bad. I won't recap their history too much for this video, as we still have one more Simpsons game from them to play after this one. Instead, the Imagineering game we are looking at today is Bart vs. the Juggernauts, which released on the Game Boy in September 1992. Bart vs. the Juggernauts is the second of the original standalone games that were created for the Game Boy. Back when I was looking at Escape from Camp Deadly, it made sense to me that they would make an original game for the Game Boy rather than porting Bart vs. the Space Mutants across. This tactic must have been successful for Acclaim, because this became the standard for Simpsons games on the Game Boy. The only Simpsons game that was ported to the Game Boy from other consoles was Krusty's Funhouse. Everything else was original. When Bart vs. the World was released for Christmas 1991, we got Escape from Camp Deadly alongside it. Now that we're in 1992, the big Simpsons game for that Christmas was Bart's Nightmare. There wasn't a Game Boy port of Bart's Nightmare, we instead got Bart vs. the Juggernauts. There was a real commitment to the Game Boy, as this is the second original game on the handheld, with two more still to come. In comparison, Sega's handheld, the Game Gear, was treated very differently. The Game Gear got 5 games released on it, the same amount as the Game Boy, but all of them were ports. There isn't a single original game on it, it's all downgrades of console games, mostly based off the Mega Drive and Master System versions. It's cool that the Game Gear received lots of support, but its lineup of games stand out when comparing it to the Game Boy. The games each system got were very different. For the Game Boy, they were really banking on people seeing Bart on the cover and picking it up just because of that. Acclaim did a lot of marketing for games like Bart vs. the Space Mutants and Bart's Nightmare, but these games never came to the Game Boy, so the advertising for the Game Boy games were combined with other Simpsons games instead. By being original games that only released on the Game Boy, it made them all more forgotten. Unlike a game like Krusty's Funhouse, these games weren't ported to other systems, and when you had more successful console games released at the same time as each of them, something like Bart vs. the Juggernauts was never going to stand out. Interestingly, this game sometimes got called The Simpsons 2, rather than Bart vs. the Juggernauts, which shows how little value the actual game's name had. I've never played this game before, but there's a couple of reasons to be optimistic about Bart vs. the Juggernauts. The first is that Bart Simpson's Escape from Camp Deadly turned out pretty well. A flawed game, but one that was at least designed for the Game Boy and did fix some of the problems that the console Imagineering games had. The second reason is that the credits look very different for this game. Most of the work is contributed to Bill Janet, who handled programming, graphics and design. They didn't work on any of the previous Imagineering Simpsons games, and it's a much smaller team overall, even by early 90s standard. I might be being naive, but the signs point to this being better than something like Space Mutants, so let's keep a positive mindset as we check out Bart vs. the Juggernauts. There's no boot screens, we straight away kick off with the title screen. It shows off the name of the game, with Bart and a Juggernaut person egging each other on. This is probably the best title screen we've seen so far. It's amazing how just a little bit of movement can add so much to a title screen for a Game Boy game like this. The lights going over the crowd look really good, and the music is a nice mix between something that sounds like The Simpsons and something to sell the game show setting. So, what is the premise of the game? Well, Bart has entered a game show which has competitors take on the Juggernauts in different challenges. Think the TV show Gladiators, only a cartoon Simpsons version. The show is split up into different weeks, and each week Bart must take place in a series of different mini-games to earn money. The TV show itself is hosted by Ken Brockman and Dr. Marvin Monroe. The character's so popular he was killed off. Brockman and Monroe will set up each week and talk about Bart's performance for each minigame, either praising him or slagging him off if you do badly. These little back and forth between the two characters surprisingly add a lot to this game. It helps that the characters look pretty accurate to the show. For something on the Game Boy, they both look quite good. The dialogue is also pretty entertaining. Might not make you laugh out loud, but this is text you're reading on the Game Boy. There's only so much they could do. Considering the limitations, there's some good lines here with Monroe using the show as an opportunity to sell his own stuff. There's a decent variety with what they can say, but after a bit you will see the same lines repeated and you can skip those by pressing B if you don't want to read them again. Presentation wise, this game is one of the most impressive since The Simpsons Arcade. It's rooted in The Simpsons while still doing its own thing with the Juggernauts, and there's a real effort on show here. For the gameplay, this is a minigame collection. For week 1 of the game, there's 2 different minigames to complete. Dr. Marvin Monroe's Hop, Skip and Fry, and Captain Lars Murdoch's Skateboard Bash and Crash. Let's start with Skateboard Bash and Crash. Bart's on his skateboard, you have to mash A to go faster, avoid the obstacles in your path, and then launch yourself off a ramp at a Juggernaut standing on a platform. You get 3 attempts and you win by knocking off the Juggernaut. It's a simple minigame, but one that I don't really enjoy. You need really good reaction times to avoid the obstacles, as you need to maintain a high speed to launch yourself off the ramp. There's 3 lanes that obstacles can be in, but when you're at max speed, you get very little time to get out of the way. The game can also spawn pizza slices right at the end of the ramp, which are very hard to see, and hitting them will cause you to fail. This minigame can be very easy, but when you get bad spawning with obstacles like this, it can be frustrating. The difficulty swings based on random factors in this minigame is not a good sign for things to come. The other minigame is Hop, Skip and Fry. The game takes place on a grid and you have to pick up a ball, hop across the grid and get the ball in the hoop. There's 2 Juggernauts that you want to avoid, and you need to stay on the light panels to get across the grid. Landing on a dark panel shocks you, sending you back to the beginning, and if you get shocked 3 times, you fail at the minigame. I quite like the idea for this one. There's more to it than you would expect from a minigame, but ultimately Hop, Skip and Fry is terrible. My first hour and a half of playing Bart vs the Juggernauts was just playing this minigame and trying to do well at it. The first problem is that it doesn't explain the basic controls. To hop in a direction, you just press the direction on the D-pad and that's simple enough. But you can also hold the A button and then press a direction to jump 2 tiles instead of 1. I only knew this from looking it up in the manual, because while the minigame is impossible without this knowledge, it's not something they mention in the game itself. The next problem is the tile switching. Every now and then the screen will start flashing, which means the light and dark panels are going to reverse, so if you're currently on a light panel and don't move, it will turn dark and you will get zapped. It's an okay idea to stop the minigame becoming too samey, but the screen can flash sometimes without the panels swapping. The screen flashing for a few seconds means the panels are switching, but you'll get short flashes when nothing happens. You don't get a lot of time to react to the panel switching, as you have to hop over to a dark panel as it's switching to a light panel, but you can't react straight away to the screen flashing because if the panels aren't switching, you'll just land on a dark panel and get zapped. As the only way you can move is by hopping, there's a fixed amount of time between every move you make, so trying to trick the player like this with these different flashes is so needless. I eventually got a feel of how this worked, but it was by largely ignoring the smaller flashes and guessing when a small flash is likely going to be a longer one based on how much time there's been since they reversed. Those are the main 2 frustrations with the gameplay, but outside of those are other problems. For the Juggernauts that you have to avoid, if you do land on them, they knock you to a different tile and you could land on a light or dark panel. It's pretty much random. The minigame is also too long. It lasts 95 seconds, which is just 95 seconds of hopping back and forth. Hop, Skip and Fry and Skateboard Bash and Crash are the only 2 minigames you play for week 1, and the objective is to earn enough money from both minigames in order to progress onto week 2 and the next round of minigames. You need $10,000 for week 1, and I struggled to earn enough money for this. I was able to win at the skateboard one, which got me over halfway there, but for Hop, Skip and Fry, I was barely getting any money from it. It turns out that if you get shocked 3 times, that will always count as you losing the minigame, and you only get $500 for every ball you get in the hoop. You win the minigame not by scoring a lot, but by surviving until the end, and you get extra money for every life you have. If you win the minigame and have all 3 lives left, you win $2,500, which means I would have been better off by doing absolutely nothing and just have that count as a win. Scoring 4 times and dying gets you $2,000, which is less than you get for not trying at all. In practice, it is better to actually play the minigame to get money. A problem though is that tying winning the minigame to your lives means it's usually better to play it really safe when you only have 1 life left and do nothing for the rest of the minigame. Even knowing how to win the minigames, there's still more money that you can make, which is pretty much required in order to beat the game. In the skateboard minigame, if you go past the Juggernaut, there's a floating skateboard you can collect which gives you more prize money. In Hop, Skip and Fry, if you hold A when approaching the hoop with a ball, Bart will dunk it and that will give you extra money every time you score. Now, I'm all for having secrets in games. Playing a game, figuring it out and finding extra layers to it is really fun and rewarding. With how frustrating these two minigames are though, especially for the very first minigames you play, having these extra layers only makes playing the game more frustrating. There's no reasonable way to know about either of these tricks. At the beginning of each minigame, there are hints about them, but not useful ones. Dr. Monroe says to experiment with some new moves, but how are you supposed to interpret that as hold A to dunk to get more money? It doesn't even directly tell you anywhere that dunking does give you more money. The numbers are just higher when they're counting up your score at the end. I was really surprised at how painful the beginning of this game was. I expected something a bit clunky or maybe a bit basic as it's a minigame collection, but it's miserable playing this. Like any game, the more you play it, the better you get at it, and I was able to get to a place where I was decently consistent at both the minigames. Getting to that point though was awful. I hate the Hop, Skip and Fry minigame. It's so repetitive, so annoying to play. I'm going to put it in the Simpsons video game Hall of Shame that I've just made up. It'll be joining the museum level in Bart vs. the Space Mutants and adventures in Krusty Land from Bart's House of Weirdness. Ultimately, there was no satisfaction to figuring this game out and its quirks. It was a few minutes of gameplay, getting a game over and trying again. It's an awful start and I can only hope it gets better. After each week, if you win all the minigames in that week, then you get to play a bonus minigame to earn more money. It's a simple game where you collect weights and drop them onto a bar that a Juggernaut is carrying. This setup reminds me of the Babysitter Bandit boss from Space Mutants, only in reverse. I can't complain about this minigame. It's so basic and short that there's nothing to really dislike. For week 2, we have 3 minigames and one of them is Hop, Skip and Fry again. We've only played 3 minigames and they're already being repeated, and even worse, it's one of the longer and more tedious minigames that you have to play again in week 2. Luckily by the time you get to week 2, you will need to be pretty good at Hop, Skip and Fry anyway, so it's not as bad as playing it in week 1, but it feels terrible to have to play it again so soon. The actual worst part of all this is that there's no variation. It's the exact same as it was in week 1. Nothing changes, same grid, same juggernauts, there's no updates to it. In a way that's quite good, as there's nothing to make this minigame harder. It's difficult not to call this anything but lazy. If you're going to reuse minigames, at least make them a little bit different. The other minigames in week 2 are brand new, with most having Shove Fest and Nuclear Power Plant Bop Till You Drop. These minigames are quite similar, where they're one-on-one fights against the Juggernauts. They both have the same problem of there's actually quite a few moves you can do, the game just doesn't explain to you what they are. After another quick look in the manual, I was able to try different moves, but I was losing badly in each fight. You're going to fail at these minigames the first time you play them, and that means you don't earn enough money to get to week 3 and getting kicked back to the title screen. To get back to week 2 and to try and figure out these new minigames, you have to play week 1 all over again. The minigames themselves are frustrating, but this strict game over system makes them even more frustrating. The game makes no effort to explain how the minigames work, and when you inevitably lose, you're then punished with a game over. Even if a minigame is decent, you're not given a chance to figure out how it works properly and enjoy it. A better system would have been something like in the Wario Land series. In those games, you get different endings based on how much money and treasure you collected. The more you collect, the better ending you get, with Wario's prize increasing in value. This is also something that Luigi's Mansion did. You can reach the end of those games without collecting much money, the game allows you to complete it either way. Bart vs. the Juggernauts would have been much better with this system. Rather than using money to gatekeep progress and trigger game overs, instead have it as a high score system, where the better you do in the minigames, the more money you earn and the better ending you get. A practice mode would have helped as well, with proper control explanations so you could get a better sense of the minigames before going on a full run to get a high score. Instead, we have this loop of playing the same minigames over and over again, and the sense of progression gets lost. It's a nasty mix of being repetitive and ambiguous, which makes it annoying to play. For Shove Fest and Bop Till You Drop, both the minigames can be beaten by repeating the same move over and over again. Whenever I tried to use different moves and mix things up, it gave the enemies too much time to attack back, and once they start attacking, it's very easy to lose. Spamming the same attack gives them less time to react, making it the best strategy. It's a shame though, as the setup and presentation of these minigames are really cool. It's pretty novel to be fighting a Juggernaut above the nuclear power plant. You even fight Barney during Moe's minigame, in a setup that's strangely similar to The Simpsons Wrestling that came out years later. I love having Moe and Mr. Burns set up the minigames as well. They really managed to capture the show more than other Imagineering games have done before. It's impressive seeing how much Simpsons they've crammed into the Game Boy. If the minigames were more fun and the gameplay better balanced, I would probably be singing this game's praises. Spamming the same attack actually makes the new minigames easy, so it didn't take long to get to week 3. Winning each minigame once again lets you play the bonus minigame, only this time you need to drop extra weights to win. There are 4 minigames in week 3, with 2 new ones and 2 repeats. The repeats are Skateboard Bash and Crash and Shove Fest. Even when I was able to get to week 3 consistently, I never enjoyed the skateboard one. You can earn a lot of money finding the bonus skateboard, it just always felt too random, and the reaction time always felt too strict. The Moe one was okay to have to play again as it's easy to cheese. The first new minigame in week 3 is the Krusty Land Hammer Slammer, and this is the most horrific version of Krusty I've ever seen. After playing so much Krusty's Funhouse for the last video, I thought I had seen it all, but Krusty looks so wrong. Look at him when he speaks to you, it's completely demonic. It's way scarier than the clown bed that Homer makes for Bart in the show. The minigame itself is a plate spinning game. There are 4 poles that Juggernauts are climbing down, and you have to stop them from reaching the bottom. You do this by hitting the bottom of the pole with a hammer, which sends a Krusty face up to knock the Juggernauts back upwards. Essentially, they're the test your might machines from a fair. It's an okay minigame, but it falls for the same trap as we've seen with the other minigames, where it doesn't tell you the controls, and not knowing them makes it impossible to beat. When I first played this minigame, I failed it because I didn't realise you could run between the poles. If you double tap left or right, you run to the next pole rather than walk. You need to do this to beat this minigame. You're too slow if you're only walking. Having to figure this out isn't too big of a deal in a vacuum, but the consequence of this is that when you first play the minigame, you'll fail at it, which means you're failing at week 3 and starting all over again from week 1 because the game didn't tell you you could run. Once you know how to run though, it's not too hard to finish. The second new minigame is Herman's Military Minefield Mayhem. It's split into 2 parts, the first where you have to parachute down while avoiding water balloons and knives, and the second is running through a minefield. The parachute part is really hard to understand what you're supposed to do to avoid the water balloons and knives. You can take 3 hits, but you lose them so quickly. The controls are very loose as you're using a parachute, so going side to side makes you a giant target rather than being a good way to avoid the projectiles. Even if you do survive, landing on the ground can kill you. As always, there's a trick here with the controls to make this easier. The parachute section is all about holding up at the right time to slow yourself down. It's better to let a water balloon go past by slowing down than it is to try and move to the side as it's being thrown. You have to hold up to land as well, as you have to go slow enough when reaching the ground to not take damage. This is probably the most unfair part of the game as a whole. Even after practicing this minigame, it's hard not to take any hits. A friendly reminder that failing this minigame and getting a second chance at it involves beating every other minigame again up to week 3. The second half has Bart on the ground where you have to avoid mines and some water balloons. Hitting a mine is an instant fail, although you do get 3 attempts to beat this and there is a checkpoint after you land, so you don't have to repeat the parachute section again. This section is all about taking the correct route, but it's hard to figure out what that is. The mines are quite difficult to see, and the mines are placed diagonally on the ground. It makes seeing where Bart can go and where he can't involve a bit of trial and error. It's not clear which gaps you can go through and which ones you can't. I really like the setting and look at this minigame though, the presentation is still really good. After beating each of the minigames and earning over $52,000 needed for week 3, it's time for week 4 and the final set of minigames. There are 5 minigames and sadly only one of them is new. We have 4 repeats, Hop, Skip and Fry, still tedious, Bop Till You Drop, still easy to cheese, Hammer Slammer, still decent enough, and Military Minefield Mayhem, still hard. The new minigame is the Quickie Mart Doggy Dodge. Instead of being a minigame, it's a full platforming level where you have to avoid dogs, swing off sausages, and climb upwards to reach a poo. There's no time limit, and the score is tied to how many times you die, so you can play this like a normal platformer. It's a really nice idea having this level towards the end of the game, but Imagineering and platforming are not a good combination. It's actually not that bad, but avoiding the dogs can be annoying. The dogs are an instant kill, and jumping over them isn't that easy. There are items you can use to distract the dogs, but they sometimes don't do anything. I believe it's because you have to be really close for the items to work, but it's not clear. Swinging from the sausages is a bit awkward as well. You only barely make it across each time. There are checkpoints, so it's not as difficult to complete as it could have been. No idea how attack dogs relate to Apu and the Quickie Mart. This feels like maybe Mr. Burns should have hosted this minigame. After winning at each minigame and doing well enough to earn over $100,000, that's it. Kent Brockman declares Bart the new Juggernauts champion and your prize is revealed. Bart is awarded Truckosaurus, and there's a little scene showing Truckosaurus destroying a car with fireworks going off. Truckosaurus looks pretty amazing for the Game Boy. It looks spot on. Nothing else happens though. You get this scene with the Simpsons theme playing in the background and then it's back to the title screen. As cool as Truckosaurus is, I would have liked to seen something a little bit more. For how difficult it is to beat this game, how many times you have to play the same minigames over and over again, there needed to be something else to make the journey feel worth it. Even one extra screen would have been enough. There isn't anything else to do or see in this game. There's very little content. It's technically longer than Escape from Camp Deadly to beat, but it doesn't feel that way. You spend too much time playing the same minigames without anything extra surrounding them, so it feels quite bare bones when it's all said and done. So that's Bart vs the Juggernauts. I was surprised by this one. I was surprised at how much it captures The Simpsons while using the silly premise of Bart going on a game show. The dialogue between Kent Brockman and Dr. Marvin Monroe is enjoyable, and there's lots of different characters hosting the minigames, which is fun to see. I couldn't ask for much more with its presentation for a minigame collection on the original Game Boy. As a minigame collection though, it's a pretty bad one. There's a few decent ideas littered throughout, but most of them aren't very fun. The minigames are bogged down by the game not explaining how the minigames work and the structure of the game as a whole. There are only 8 minigames in total, and that's including the bonus one, so the game ended up being padded and overly difficult to stretch out its total playtime. 7 of the minigames you have to play more than once in a full playthrough. Combine this with the game over system, and it means you're playing these minigames over and over again just to try and beat this game, and it shines the light on each minigame in a way that I don't think a good minigame collection should. A good minigame collection is one where they find an appropriate framing around the minigame so it's a fun, complete experience where you're not focusing on each individual minigame. Like how WarioWare has really short minigames and is fast paced, and Mario Party has the game board with the random chaos factor added in. Bart vs the Juggernauts doesn't have a good gameplay framing for its minigames, so for this game to be good, each minigame has to do a lot of heavy lifting in the gameplay department. None of the minigames are particularly great, and at their worst, they're frustrating and tedious. If the money and week system was reworked and there was a few more variations of each minigames, then I could see it being okay, but that's really the ceiling for this game. The presentation is great, but it's still hard to recommend because of how irritating it is to play. I'm going to rank it underneath Bart's House of Weirdness and above Bart vs the World for the Atari ST. Bart vs the Juggernauts is quite similar to House of Weirdness, looks great with frustrating gameplay, but House of Weirdness just looks better and has a lot more references to the show. I'm putting Bart vs the Juggernauts above the Bart vs the World ports because it isn't as bland as those games. Bart vs the Juggernauts might be more annoying gameplay wise, but it feels like a better Simpsons game overall. And that's Bart vs the Juggernauts added to the list. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this look at the game, please consider giving the video a like or leaving a comment below. I'll see you next time for Bart's Nightmare. I don't know what type of nightmare Bart is going to have, but after playing all these bad Bart video games, I feel like I've already experienced it.